And then we also were lucky enough to be able to acquire URL for Ripple. It came from a Grateful Dead super fan. It's related to the song Ripple from the Grateful Dead. We always loved the Grateful Dead.
I've been a Grateful Dead fan for 50 years, so.
It's related to the song Ripple from the Grateful Dead. We always loved the Grateful Dead.
It's a Greek symbol. And so out of that, we created a logo called the Triskelion, which is our Ripple logo.
Buy crypto, suckers!
We're here to cover the sneak preview of our new sponsor, Excellent Burger.
Excellent Burger. Well, they seem to be succeeding. $700.
Just getting word, Springfield Dam is ruptured and water is roaring down.
Our work on Phoenix, which continues to be in kind of alpha/beta, and
the XRP ledger is an open source decentralized technology, not dissimilar to Bitcoin. And some of the creators of the XRP ledger actually had been early engineers that worked on Bitcoin.
So the idea was to build both a more efficient consensus algorithm that accomplished the same thing. That's sort of effectively the birth of XRP.
I have been developing my own cryptocurrency.
To be in cash of the future, not in your wallet, I'm in your computer.
So will Frankcoin finally be the invention that makes me rich? This equation, if solved, could make all digital coins worthless, including Franks. Could make all digital coins worthless, including Franks.
Someone posted a solution on the whiteboard.
Did I do it?
Equation was solved. Solved by the one person who could solve it. Professor John Frank.
Ripple actually goes back to these three geniuses, one of them sitting right here, taking some of the ideas from the Ripple project around the idea of pathfinding algorithms to exchange anything value for any other thing of value, kind of a magic combination.
It's taken me 25 years to come to the conclusion that I have come to. And I want to tell you that one of the biggest things I discovered in my work was the existence of a supranational committee composed of 300 men called the Committee of 300, also known in intelligence circles as the Olympians.
300 people you've never heard of. They don't hold office, they don't give speeches, they don't campaign, they don't need your vote. And he's not talking about the secret societies you've heard 100 times. This is what the headlines never touch.
This is the committee that runs the world. Now, in my book, The Committee of 300, I name every one of them. This is not a book that talks about they. It gives you specifics.
Now, this is one of those videos that rarely stays visible for long. But what you're about to watch will explain a lot of the strange things happening in the world right now. So let's get right into it.
Who and what is the Committee of 300? Well, I've dealt with that. I've told you this is a supranational body that knows no boundaries, respects the laws of no countries. The first time that they were publicly announced was by a German socialist by the name of Walter Rathenau. Now, I'll give you some background of Walter Rathenau. He was the financial advisor to the Kaiser of Germany, and he was also the financial advisor to the Rothschilds, the French family Rothschild. So he must have known what he's talking about. He made an astonishing statement in 1934. He said, there is a committee of 300 men that rule the world. They are known only to each other, and nothing happens without their consent.
This isn't about symbols, or handshakes, or a club everyone already suspects. This is the top of the chain. At least that's his claim. The structure nobody sees. And as this man will explain, every organization has its place. They all fit into a hierarchy. But at the very top, 300 people. Pay attention to this part.
I came across this quite by accident when I was serving in Africa, in Angola, and I was given a series of documents which were only supposed to be handed in to top-level people. They were what we called above the top level of classification of intelligence documents. And there I discovered that whilst I thought I was in Africa fighting against the invasion of the communists, I was in fact fighting to introduce socialist regimes in the black African countries, and that I was actually working for a committee called the Committee of 300, also known in intelligence circles as the Olympians.
This isn't someone guessing from the sidelines. He's describing a moment where the story didn't match the mission. He thought he was fighting one enemy. Then he claims he realized he was building something else entirely. And that raised a different kind of question. Not who's in charge, but how high the chain really goes. His name is Dr. John Coleman, and he frames this as a 25-year-old investigation shaped by intelligence-level access. Let's keep going.
In 1986, I wrote a work called Mind Control, Metaphysics, Extremely Low Frequency Radiation and Weather Modifications. And in that work, July the 8th, 1986, I said that the top-level intelligence organization in the United States was the National Reconnaissance Office, far bigger than the CIA and any of the other intelligence agencies. And by the way, we have about 10 different ones in the United States. I even had the audacity to give the address of this organization. 3 weeks ago, Mr. Sam Donaldson, the gentleman who wears that beautiful toupee so effectively, he came on with a program in prime time, and he said, this is one of the biggest scoops that ABC has ever had. And he told about the National Reconnaissance Organization. The exact same thing that I published 8 years earlier. I tell you this to set the stage so that you'll understand I do have some experience and that I know that of which I speak.
So here's what he's doing. He's not just making a claim. He's planting a marker in time, 1986. And he says he named the organization before the public was even supposed to know it existed. Because once you understand that layer exists, you stop thinking intelligence is just spies in meetings. It's reach, it's visibility, it's who gets to see the world first and who reacts second. And if a system like that sits above the usual agencies, then you have to ask a darker question. What sits above that? Watch this.
And I came across the families in Italy who were called the Fondi, meaning the people who had all the money. They were all members of the Committee of 300, the Lucatis, the Recanatis, the Volpi du Miseratis. These people are so wealthy that they would make David Rockefeller look like a piker. That is how rich they are. And this is the committee that runs the world. Now, in my book, The Committee of 300, I name every one of them. This is not a book that talks about they. It gives you specifics.
This is where his story shifts, from theory to names. Not they, not someone. He's saying, I can point to families. And whether you believe his list or not, the idea underneath it is real. Power doesn't reset every 4 years. It accumulates. It inherits. It survives scandals, elections, and headlines. Because the kind of influence that lasts isn't built on popularity. It's built on ownership, on access, on networks that don't need to introduce themselves. But even wealth isn't the whole machine. Wealth needs a way to move the world without showing its hand. And this is where it gets uncomfortable.
When former head of state Mikhail Gorbachev visited the United States a few years ago, flanked by George Bush and Quayle, he opened his Gorbachev Foundation in the United States. And he let slip, he said, this is being done with approval of the Committee of 300. CNN cameras were on him. They immediately switched. Now, I wrote to CNN and I said, could I have a transcript of this program, which they said was available. I never got a reply. I followed it up with letter after letter, but nothing ever came of it. The point I'm trying to make, ladies and gentlemen, is that the federal government, the secret upper-level parallel government that runs the United States, does not want you to know that you have an upper-level parallel government that calls the shots, that dictates what is going to happen to your life and mine.
That line changes everything, because now he's not describing a theory, he's describing a system that protects itself. Maybe there's an innocent explanation, maybe not. But the point is this: if influence can decide what gets recorded, then it can also decide what gets remembered. And once power becomes something you can't even trace, the next question isn't who, it's where. Where does a structure like that live? Because it wouldn't operate as a rumor, it would operate through institutions. Pay attention to this part.
I revealed the existence of an organization called the Royal Institute for International Affairs, which is located at Chatham House in 10 St. James Square in London. I also revealed the existence of the Club of Rome, the Cini Foundation, the Mont Pelerin Society, the Order of St. John, which was known but not known. And I listed all of these secret societies that run the world as executive arms of the Committee of 300. So it controls the world through all of these. The Royal Institute for International Affairs is the executive arm of this committee, which gives instructions to the United States government to this very day. The chain of command is as follows. Every Secretary of State that has been appointed since 1919 is appointed by the Royal Institute for International Affairs. That may come as a shock for you. You think you vote and you put a conservative in the White House, and then he appoints supposedly or allegedly conservative people to carry out the policies that you wanted him to implement. Surprise, surprise. I ask you to find me a conservative Secretary of State since 1919. And if you search diligently and apply the correct rules, you will come up blank. Every one of the Secretaries of State was chosen in London by the Secretary of State, as was Wilson, the President Wilson, as was Roosevelt, as was James Earl Carter. He was specially chosen because he'd had 3 mental breakdowns, and they felt he would be a good guy to manipulate. Oh, I'm talking facts.
Different presidents, different parties, the same advisory structure. Because when policy is filtered before it even reaches an election, votes don't change direction, they change packaging. But institutional influence alone doesn't move societies. To shape real outcomes, it needs something stronger. Leverage, economic pressure, dependence that turns choices into necessities. And that's where the next phase begins.
This Committee of 300 told a man called Aurelio Pecci to form this Club of Rome with the main object of bringing down the industries and the agricultural development of the United States. He immediately wrote a paper in which he said there are too many people on the earth, and that the United States, with its industrial development, its agricultural development, is responsible for this curse of overpopulation. So the Club of Rome was instituted and organized to start an attack on the world's population using the United States as the whipping boy. And they came up with a paper called the Zero Growth Post-Industrial Plan for Industry and Agriculture for the United States of America.
This is where his claims shift from politics to pressure. He connects the Committee of the Club of Rome. He connects the Club of Rome to zero growth. And then he connects zero growth to one outcome: tightening the system. Now, you don't have to accept the motive he assigns to it, but the mechanism is real. When systems tighten, the impact doesn't hit evenly. The wealthy buffer it, the poor adapt to it, and the middle absorbs it. Mortgages, wages, savings, stability. That's the layer that carries the strain. Now listen closely to what he claims next.
The middle class in the United States of America had to be destroyed because in the coming push to a world order, the middle class would be the stumbling block, because History had shown that the peasant class in ancient days, when they had revolted, were just easily crushed. There was no resistance, but now had grown a new super class of people in the United States called the middle class, who had long-term employment, who had job security, who were well paid, who could afford to buy the products that were made by the United States and didn't need to buy products from China or anywhere else. And the Club of Rome post-industrial zero-growth paper said this has got to stop. We have to bring down the middle class of the United States. And the way that we will do this, the way that we will accomplish this task, is by crushing their industries.
Whether you call it policy, markets, or global pressure, the weight never lands evenly. It lands where society is most stable, the middle. Because the middle has something to lose: a job, a mortgage, a routine, a future. And when that layer weakens, dependence grows quietly. Not overnight, but structurally. While ordinary people feel instability as pain, those above it experience the same events as logistics. They hedge, they move assets, they buy buffers. And that's the real divide. Not what happens, but who it happens to. Here's how Coleman explains it.
The Club of Rome celebrated its cell-diversity anniversary, and Alexander King, its chairman, stated, the American people henceforth must get used to the idea that they will never ever again in their lifetime have full employment. What a scandalous thing that our government is fully cooperating with this organization built up by the Royal Institute for International Affairs to destroy the middle class of the United States.
By the end of this, you realize something disturbing. Coleman isn't asking you to fear a group, he's asking you to notice a pattern. That power doesn't always rule by force, it rules by structure. It decides what gets funded, what gets outsourced, what gets normalized, and what becomes permanent. And once society is locked into pressure, it doesn't need to be controlled loudly, it controls itself. And that's why faces can change, and the direction can stay identical. So maybe the question isn't who runs the world, maybe it's simpler than that.
XRP The Simpsons in 1994, the man who exposed the entire system. You guys saw the intro. Let's elaborate further on this. So that guy that you mainly saw that did a lot of speaking in the intro, he spoke specifically about what? Well, he mentioned numerous things, right? Obviously, the whole idea of the Olympian Council, National Reconnaissance Office, the Fondi, basically, the people who had all the money, the Committee of 300, et cetera, et cetera. And maybe I elaborate in a future video more about the Committee of 300. But for this video, I will put some emphasis on the Royal Institute of International Affairs, also known as Chatham House. Why do I want to do that? Well, consider smashing the like, stick around to the end, because if you jump out after 5 minutes, it won't make any sense. Again, I understand people don't have all the time in the world, but guess what? We're all busy people. So hit this pause button, come back, make some time for it. I promise you it's going to get interesting. So again, let's jump into it. We're going to start off first with this gematria calculator. And I understand for a lot of people, maybe you cringe at some of this stuff. Maybe you don't understand it all. And that's okay. I'll try my best to explain it in a way it'll be easy for you to understand. There is results by Jewish gematria. For one, like ISO. In Jewish gematria, these numbers have meaning, okay? So like what you see here, 149, even with RIP, short for Ripple, 149, all right? I want to point some things out, okay? So I understand that Grok isn't the end-all be-all, but it did help me out with this. In popular online gematria calculators, both ISO and RIP equate to the value 149. It's a numerical match, which is often interpreted in numerological or esoteric context as a sign of interconnection or symbolic equivalence. Now, this whole point of interconnection, when I get further into this outline, I want you guys to think of things like the interledger protocol, because if anything, that's interconnection, is it not? So basically, it's like this. We see here ISO, referring to ISO 222 financial messaging standard, seen as ripping apart or replacing outdated systems like SWIFT. Last November 2025, we know that we went from MT messaging that dates back to the 1970s to MX, okay? We know that basically Swift founded ISO 222 messages in 2004, and ironically, it's the same year Ripple came out, right? And it was under a different name back then. RIP may also allude to Ripple, obviously company behind XRP, and some of these other things. So interestingly, ISO 222 itself also calculates to 149 in these systems. Again, it's kind of interesting. And more importantly, Sinai. And again, the reason I want to point out Sinai is because when you jump back to this, you even see Sinai listed right here. I think like things in the Bible, right? Like Mount Sinai. And again, even jumping back to this just real quick, because we'll move along with this. Basically, there's biblical significance, right? So by definition, even when we look into like the Hebrew meaning of it, means divine truth from divine good. Okay, Mount Sinai, right? The Lord is the way, the truth, of life, et cetera, right? So it seems divine, right? These terms I want you guys to pay attention to. There's a lot of people who click out of this. It is what it is, but I'm gonna get really deep in some of this. So even from gematria, from basically Wikipedia, you see here some scholars propose at least 2 cases of gematria appear in the New Testament. And this is where I feel as though gematria has some valid reasoning. Okay, so according to one theory, and again, I'm not trying to say all this is truth or anything like that. I'm trying to share some things with you guys. I want you guys to expand your horizons with this. I think this stuff is really interesting. Okay, so according to one theory, the reference to the miraculous catch of 153 fish in John 21:11 is an application of gematria derived from the name of the spring called Eglaim, right? In Ezekiel, and again, I'm probably not pronouncing that right in regards to Eglaim, 47:10, the appearance of gematria in John 21:11 has been connected to one of the Dead Sea Scrolls, namely 4Q252, which also applies to the same gematria of 153. Again, this is why I'm coming back to 153. Derived from Ezekiel 47 to state that Noah arrived at Mount Ararat on the 153rd day at the beginning of the flood. Okay, so again, beginning of the flood. Now think about Ripple, okay? And why do we want to get into some of these things? Well, for one, back to gematria for a second. We see here specifically boat 153. We know about the ark. The ark was the biggest boat, right? And if anything, it's so interesting to get even more into it because there's other things in gematria that point out hellfire begins. Now, if that doesn't catch your attention, I don't know if anything will. Let's jump into this next part. We see, I know it sounds crazy, from Senator Bernie Sanders, United States Senator from Vermont. We know that he's an independent, but of course he was with the Democrats when he ran, right, and so on, because he basically was trying to get that going on. Again, I'm not trying to make it political, but basically, as of recent, of February 2nd, not that long ago, just a few days ago, he said, quote, "We need to cap credit card interest rates at 10%. Trump is right." Hearing Bernie Sanders saying Trump is right. Now, here's the kicker. Down here, he says, in the Divine Comedy, think about this terminology, Dante reserved a special place in the 7th circle of hell for people who charge usurious interest rates. Today, we don't need the hellfire and the pitchforks. We don't need the rivers of boiling blood, but we do need a national law that caps interest rates on credit cards at 10%. And he basically says it's not a radical idea. And the American people, Democrats, Republicans, Independents agree. Credit card companies are ripping us off. Yeah, they have been for decades, right? Now watch this. Here's another reference. Call it citation, call it whatever you want. This is from PIIE.com. Why am I pointing this out? I want to establish, again, a paper trail on some of this stuff. We see here that PIIE points out bubbles are getting blown out of all proportion. Again, September 8th, 2004. Now, call it ironic. Again, this is the same year of Ripple, technically speaking, coming into existence. Okay, and it's the same time that what? ISO 222 is founded, right? Again, we didn't have it mandated and so on, right? Establishing a paper trail here, okay? More importantly, what do you see in the terminology? Like the hellfire preachers of yesterday, today's economic pundits are taking a stern line on axis. Economies that enjoyed asset price booms, notably the United States, are damned to pay for their went ways. Central banks, yes, central banks that attempted to offset the negative effects of a bubble burst, notably the United States Federal Reserve, are merely postponing the day of judgment, and if anything, compounding their sin by blowing up other bubbles in housing or government bonds. Think about that term about government bonds. What is the emphasis in today's world when it comes to tokenization, et cetera, et cetera? A lot of focus on government bonds. Financial press is full of grim prognostications of economic damnation postponed but not avoided. Now watch this. We jump into this a little bit more because you guys saw that thing about the Simpsons. The triskelion is an ancient symbol featuring 3 interlocked spirals or bent human legs originating from the Neolithic era, with the oldest known carving dating back to 3200 BC, before Christ. That's interesting. And look what it says here. Remember how I'm always talking about for years now in my videos? Utility in motion? This represents motion, progress, and the cycle of life, often associated with concepts like birth, death, rebirth, or body, mind, spirit. So if you haven't seen the other video from the other day, I'll put an in-screen card. We talked about XRP 322. And what was one of the things that obviously Skull and Bones point out, right? Symbols of death. Do you find this a coincidence? Draw your own conclusion. Again, I'm not saying what I'm sharing here is all truth and I have all the answers, but if anything, I could piece some things together and really spark your interest on some of this stuff. I know I can. Getting more into this, we see specifically what? Back to the whole thing of triskelion. We know that the Ripple logo looks a lot like that, does it not? And if anything, I want to point out, again, more of the terminology here. We see here, this consists of either a triple spiral exhibiting rotational symmetry or of other patterns in triplicate that emanate from a common center. The spiral can be based on interlocking Archimedean spiral. So interlocking, where does these terms come from? Well, basically it's like this. When I think about distributed ledger technology, I think of things like, obviously, the interledger protocol. And what do we know when it comes to interlocking? Interledger protocol points out hash time lock agreements. Again, call it coincidence, but by definition, you need to have hash time lock contracts. And if anything, they'll be used with secure interledger payments. And we know about, obviously, the interledger with Ripple XRP. That's important to point out because the interledger provides what? Secure multi-hop payments using conditional transfers. Some ledgers natively provide conditional transfers using hash time lock contracts. However, not all ledgers support HTLCs. But here's the kicker. In a new spectrum, you have HTLA types that require varying levels of ledger functionality and bilateral trust. Okay, so again, to have some of that trust, again, back to the whole topic of a shared unified ledger, the internet of trust, the internet of value. And we know Ripple's role when it comes to both of those particular things. Now, again, just you may think it's all coincidental, and that's okay, but let's now jump into this next part of the puzzle. In getting into it, what was the other thing that gentleman in the intro, the longer intro, not the Simpsons one, what was the other thing he pointed out? Well, he pointed out specifically Institute Montagagni, I pronounced it right, Society, okay? I butchered that up. But basically, here's the thing. Here's a PDF. It's a 100-page long PDF. In this document, you will see some things that are profound. Now, it's all in French. Watch this. We jump down to page 86 of 100, and we see all this stuff. Shout out to guys that are part of my Patreon community like Zoo. Shout out to Pierre Pivam, right? These guys obviously speak French. Love you guys. You rock. You guys can read this, no problem. But search one of one. In the PDF, you see specifically what? Ripple. And if anything, I don't need to know French to understand where it says Les protocoles Ripple, right? Look what it says there. Now, what do we have in regard to the interpretation if we take that chunk of information and plug that into Google Translate? Well, French was detected, and we see here in English, right? I did try to refresh the PDF and see if we could automatically translate. It wouldn't let me do it. So bear with me. We see here the facilitation of currency exchange, the Ripple protocol, identifies the shortest path for exchanging currencies in a distributed peer-to-peer network. So for one, before we get into the whole part of Chatham House, we have established 2 key connectors from the gentleman that exposed the whole system in 1994. Call it a coincidence, but my main thing is it's not a coincidence if you get more than 2 or 3, 4, 5 examples when we connect it all, okay? So again, why is this important? Again, exchange of currencies in a distributed peer-to-peer network. the enhancement of the transparency and audibility of financial actors, the operations to facilitate their regulatory compliance. We just saw recently Brad Garlinghouse of Ripple join up with who? The CFTC. That is no longer just a Stellar thing, right? Stellar used to get all the bells and whistles when it came to that, and that was great. But now Brad is part of that. So again, Ripple has that compliance. Create automated financial instruments through the use of smart contracts such as smart securities and smart derivatives. I'll give you some examples of how all that comes together, and address traditional pain points in this industry and provide automation solutions. Again, workflows, automations, et cetera, et cetera. Now, let's jump over to Chatham House. Why do we want to do that? We see here, specifically speaking, that there is a highlight here that's really, really juicy. And in this document, you see, obviously, gold bullion. In this 50-page document, it says gold in the international monetary system. A report by who? Well, boil it, mash it, stick it in a stew. Chatham House Gold Task Force. And more importantly, when we jump down further into the document, my findings, in my opinion, are absolutely profound because, specifically speaking, you are going to see how it comes together. And what you see here is it states since the 1930s, on page 6 of 50 of the document, when Chatham House, the Royal Institute of International Affairs, convened an international gold problem study group, the international monetary system has always been part of the heart of their work. And look what it says in regards to 2010. Think about the time period. We know that Bitcoin was birthed out of the recession. And if anything, it came out in 2008, that white paper, the Satoshi Nakamoto white paper. And we see here from Chatham House in 2010, the Chatham House report, Beyond the Dollar, set out some of the ideas that then fed into the agenda of the G20 working group on the reform of the international monetary system in 2011. In late 2010, partly prompted by an article by Robert Zoellick, the president of the World Bank, in the Financial Times, and partly because we felt that the discussion on what? Yes, you read that right. You've been following my channel. Special drawing rights. So think about all the outlines we've done on Ripple, special drawing rights, the SDR, and going from, again, the failed special drawing rights of the SDR of the late 1960s with IMF, and the want and need for something like Ripple with XRP for an ESDR, electronic special drawing rights. Is this not adding up? If you are new to my channel, this is, again, you're not making sense of this. I understand it. I encourage you to go to my video section, literally, just type in things like SDR, and you will see some things that are very eye-opening. But let's get back to this. We felt that the discussion of the special drawing rights in Beyond the Dollar did not extend to an assessment of the role of gold in the basket. So again, back to the documentations that we shared numerous times over years about basically a basket of commodities. Is this not adding up? We believe that it was time to address in an unbiased and independent way the question of whether there is a role for gold in the international monetary system. And more importantly, they reference central banks, they reference specifically a Chatham House Gold Task Force. All right, now that we established that, let's jump to, our brother in the space, once again, the one and only Smoke Dog. Smoke points out the XRP is in fact tokenizing gold right now. For example, in 2024, Meld Gold announced integration with the XRPL to issue tokenized gold and silver, each token representing 1 gram of metal held with reputable vault providers. I've showed you outlines, basically speaking, that share what? The whole idea of XDC, basically doing a similar thing. But for the topic of the day, we are into Ripple with XRP. So let's get into this because, again, as Smoke points out, Ripple's custody services are even being utilized by commercial banks to securely store tokenized gold. All right, so what does he have here in regard to it? As we blow this up, you will see some specific things. And I think, if anything, he highlighted everything that we want to know about. And number one, we see right here, Ripple, XRP Ledger, like Stellar with XLM, which we'll get a little bit more in that part of the segment here in a bit, towards the end, was designed for efficient payments, also supporting issuing of custom assets. XRPL has seen growing interest for tokenized real-world assets, including precious metals. For example, back in 2024 with Meld Gold, which I'll share a citation from them here in a bit, announced integration with XRPL to issue tokenized gold and silver, each token representing 1 gram of the metal held with reputable vault providers. XRPL offers decentralized exchange and auto bridging of liquidity, hence on-demand liquidity, which could enable gold tokens to be traded against XRP or other tokens natively. Stamp that, go back to it, clip it, share it. get the word out. Ripple's broader network, RippleNet, typically refers to bank payment integrations, but the open source XRPL is where these tokens live. Yes, that's another thing to clip. And what do we also have? We see here, for straightforward gold tokens, XRPL's proven payment infrastructure is a good fit. It's notable that even large institutions are taking interest. For example, HSBC's recent tokenized gold offering is built on a private distributed ledger, but Ripple's custody technology via its acquisition of Medico, which was, I believe, was like $250 million, give or take, being tapped for secure storage. Now, I did promise you that I would take you over to mel.gold. What do you see here? Algorand with the XRP ledger. People are very, very much sleeping on Algorand. It's part of my portfolio. Let me know if it's part of yours, but let's get back to the topic for a second, because you see here from mel.gold what? The future of digital silver, tokenized precious metals on the blockchain, and even digital gold. Common ground, obviously, with things like XDC. And more importantly, you see the examples here, trusted by numerous conglomerates. And more importantly, common ground with copper.co. Remember how I mentioned XDC? So that adds up because both have common ground with copper.co. That's important. And again, revolutionizing the precious metals market, bringing gold and silver into the digital age. I want to highlight these 4 bullet points real quick. Tokenizing physical gold and silver, digital assets backed by real metals, trade these tokens securely and efficiently on the blockchain, access real-time pricing and ownership information, streamline the entire gold supply chain from miners to refiners to retailers. And again, digitalizing gold ownership and transactions. All right, that's great to share that. Back to Chatham House, 2021 document that specifically points out what? In 2019, they stated that the Bank of England Governor Mark Carney spoke of the destabilization of the international monetary system, lamenting the domineering influence of the dollar and indicating an active discussion is well underway about the potential impact of digital currencies on global politics. And again, why do I want to point this out? Well, basically speaking, he felt as though that we are headed towards currency cooperation. And basically speaking, he kind of talked about this because, again, widespread introduction of digital currencies. This is important. Why so? Here is why. In the finding, in my own research, there was a debate on the global economy. You will hear some key things from key players from the IMF, like Kristalina Georgieva, obviously the person that we're referencing here, which is basically Mr. Mark Carney. And if anything, draw your own conclusion on some of this. Let's go ahead and share this. Let's go ahead and play this. We'll be back here in just a brief moment. Here we go.
One of the issues about not having one foot on the gas and one foot on the brake in terms of monetary and fiscal policy.
Oh, we're back to the UK.
Yeah, well, we're back. No, we're back to everybody. Part of that leans in the same direction of what the managing director was just saying in terms of building fiscal resilience. Second point, area for coordination, cooperation. Around financial market functioning. You know, there are real issues in treasury markets around the world that have just begun. We've seen a more extreme case, obviously, in the UK with spillovers. Mohammed's talked about this. And we are headed into a period where there will be quite additional, government bonds put on the market by quantitative tightening. And that needs to, that is a financial stability issue alongside a monetary policy issue. There needs to be coordination there amongst the authorities. There needs to be thought about microprudential instruments, I just said a lot, that could potentially be adjusted for macroprudential reasons, such as the leverage ratio on banks, to help ease this transition that's necessary from a monetary perspective, but has real market functioning issues, and we should be thinking about that right now.
We are thinking about it right now. If anything, this was exposed. Now, the connectors, another key area that I clipped for you guys. Listen to this specifically. I left the transcript up on the right side about how rates are going higher. They're going to stay higher for longer, which will not only increase or not only create an increase, but you will see the whole thing of debt servicing. And what are we looking to do? Tokenize debt. Who will lead the charge for this when we finally get real clarity? I know you guys get tired of me saying that, but again, don't shoot the messenger on here. I don't obviously make policy, but think about Ripple. Think about some of these other ones that are tokenizing debt. So again, debate on the global economy. Listen to this. We'll play this for a couple of minutes as well. It will add up. Here we go.
Rates are going higher. They're going to stay higher for longer, which will not only create an increase in your debt servicing, but also will suck investment out from poorer countries.
It is true. And that's why we have to be ready. And that's why even if it means retiring some of the debts that are nearing maturity, we will do that to reduce the fiscal burden. We just can't stand still when we see the risks coming upon us.
Let's sorry, did you want to come in on that?
Oh, look, one very dire reality is that what is happening in terms of rates, currency appreciation, dollar appreciation, and capital flows is hitting emerging markets in developing countries hard. And this is where we see lessons from experience. Number one, build strong fundamentals.
Bit late to do that now.
No, those who have done it, it is like with the pandemic.
Right, but if you haven't done it already, it's a bit late.
Well, there would be another crisis to come. Build strong fundamentals.
Again, I don't know if you guys heard Biden say this a few years back when he was still in office. He said there would be another crisis to come. And again, I understand this is in 2022. So again, this is kind of post the whole thing of the pandemic. And she says basically, crisis is to come, you build the fundamentals. We already did that. Does this not add up as well? I think it does. I think you guys get it. Now, we're going to jump into some other key things. So for one, we did mention the IMF, did we not? In this, I know it sounds crazy, CIA government white paper document, where you want to call it, you will see in this 169-page document, the conspirators, hierarchy, the story of the Committee of 300. Why am I pointing that out? Again, this is a third example. I'd like to give you numerous citations in reference to the intro. I don't share intros for no reason. If I did that, that would be fluff, would it not be? Of course. So again, the focus is the Committee of 300. So for one, we just talked about two other ones. Let's get into a third one. Let's pound this home. So again, from three-letter agency, I already mentioned it. Don't want to mention it too many times because you know how that goes. And what we see here, basically speaking, is what? You see here, basically speaking, the Committee of 300 consists of certain individuals, specialists in their own fields, including cultists, some of these terms I don't want to mention out loud because, again, YouTube is going to have a hissy fit. Don't want to mention some of that. But anyway, intelligence, banking, and every facet of commercial activity. Think about that. It will be necessary to mention former members who have since deceased. So again, check out my other video I released the other day. I'll give you an in-screen card about that. Because of their former roles and because their places were given to family members of new members considered worthy of the honor. Again, back to that other video about basically, I hate to say it, Yale and Skull and Bones and so on. Included in the membership are old families of what? The European Black nobility, American Eastern liberal establishment. Not going to mention that term because, again, YouTube has a hissy fit, hierarchy, and the Order of Skull and Bones. This term, I don't know if I could say that out loud. I know I could say the other one. Or basically known by the committee as Moriah Conquering Wind. The National Royal Council, the churches, the circles of initiates, 9 known men, Lucis Trust Jesuit Liberation Fund, and boom, IMF, Bank of International Settlements, United Nations. So we've been putting a lot of emphasis on all 3 of those recently, have we not? And again, why do we want to point this out? Because you see here, basically speaking, all these ones are listed as being various members of leading foundations and insurance companies named in the list that follow who? The Hong Kong and Shanghai Bank. Now, if you're not aware of it, who is the Hong Kong and Shanghai Bank? By definition, that's HSBC. Okay, that's important to basically highlight that because, again, here's why. Basically speaking, you're looking at a loosely knit gathering of people with weird ideas, but in the Committee of 300, you have a 150-year history. You have some of the most brilliant intellects assembled to form a completely totalitarian, absolutely controlled new society. That sounds scary, does it not? Only it isn't new, having drawn most of its ideas from the clubs, and again, I don't want to mention some of that stuff out loud, strives towards a one world government rather than well described by one of its late members. And interesting to see H.G. Wells. Hey, if you read his material, he's got some brilliant, obviously, books and so on, right? So, like, there's many of them. I think the last one I read was The Time Machine, right? I probably read that book, I don't know, from front to back, probably 10 times over. It's one of my favorite books personally. But again, commissioned by the committee, Wells boldly called the open conspiracy plans for a world revolution. My goodness. Getting further into this, here's another thing I want to point out, because we're falling back on the whole thing of payments. We see here specifically in the immediate post-World War II period, again, go back to the other video in the intro, show what? Not yesterday's video, so I would say the one before it, okay? We highlighted out of the ashes. Remember at the beginning of the intro, it literally shows the Normandy invasion, but it says in the immediate post-World War II period, one of the most common methods used by Resorts International and other, like I say that out loud because I don't want to get flagged, related companies to clean money was by courier service to a money such and such bank. I don't know if I can say that either. Now all that has changed. Only the small fry still use such a risky method. The big fish conduit their money via the CHIP system, the acronym for Clearinghouse International Payment System, run by a Burroughs computer system centered at the New York Clearinghouse. 12 of the largest banks use the system. One of them, Hong Kong and Shanghai Bank, aka HSBC. Another one is Credit Suisse. All right. And again, they combine this whole thing with the Swiss system, SWIFT. Now watch this. This is important. This is very important. I want to share something with you in regard to some findings. Okay. So for one, while there is no apparent connection between the Burroughs computer system and how it has any connections to like members of Ripple or in blockchain or DLT, I found my own research and findings to be profound, because guess what? We know, or you should know, that Burroughs Corporation was a pioneering computer manufacturer focused on mainframes, accounting machines, early data processing systems that date from the 1960s to 1980s. And watch this. My own research. There's this guy, Otto B, and basically speaking, you see here his background. I'm Otto Burroughs, founder and CTO at MWorks Design LLC, where I architect and ship production-grade Web3 infrastructure. Now, you may call it a coincidence, and again, I'm not saying all this is 100% truth or anything. I'm just trying to connect the dots as much as the next guy. But he does highlight some things in regard to adopting blockchain DLT. And more importantly, is there any Ripple connection? Well, we'll get to that. He's a founder and CTO of MWorks, and you see here, co-founder, software developer, engineer of Tier 3, and open source developer of Gem Wallet. He is a French translator of Xamen. We know that Xamen Wallet is a decentralized wallet for what? Things like the XRPL. And I actually use that because if anything, I'm going to try to share some more info about ChainStats, a very slept on project on XRPL. And what do you have here? Boil it, mash it, stick in the stew. Part of his experience is that he is an XRPL DLT developer and Web3 advocate from 2020, I guess, onward. Maybe he was only there for like 6 months. But again, New York, he was an XRP DLT developer, Web3 enthusiast since 2019. Do you find that interesting? I find it incredibly interesting. And here's the other key thing. When we get to this, what do we see here? From KYC to KYT, blockchain's emerging role in the global payment system, from Quinlan Associates, 38-page document, points out what? Points out specifically on page 30 of 38, Ripple, being a US-based provider of blockchain-based payments technology, been one of the leading players in the space since 2014. Dozens of financial institutions, including HSBC, UBS, Western Union, announced trials or more advanced commercialization efforts using what? Ripple's technology. Again, do you want to call that a coincidence? Call it whatever you want. The findings are profound. We did mention Credit Suisse. Find out how this adds up to the three-letter agency that we just quoted in that document from a few tabs back. Smoke points out, 2021 Credit Suisse document confirms Corda Seller supports XRP. He says it's documented. Where does the citation come from? Literally research-doc.credit-suisse.com. Let's pull this up. We see here specifically speaking what? Well, as we zoom in, cryptocurrency impact on the payments ecosystem. Bottom right, cross-border business-to-business payments are actual pain point. Example, a problem needs to be solved. It highlights Ripple, and boom. Always funny how we reference the 300. Call that a coincidence, call whatever you want, but 300 what? Financial institutions using platform RippleNet. Again, could be a coincidence, but at the bottom you see what? R3 offers Corda Settler, which supports XRP, but intended to support multiple options, partnering with or Swift, Global Payments Innovation, which is part of Swift, with the GPI, Bank of America, et cetera, et cetera. A little bit more about this. Let's jump into this other one from the National Reconnaissance Office. So now we have a fourth example from the intro to reference. Is it still a coincidence? I'm giving you another example, okay? So again, remember the gentleman from the intro, just in case you missed it, because I know some of you guys are going to watch this again. I appreciate that. So the guy in the intro who exposes the whole system in 1994, what was one of the main ones he brought up? He brought up specifically what? The National Reconnaissance Office. He did he not? And we see here from this document from the National Reconnaissance Office, 432-page document. On page 38, what do they specifically mention? They mention, my goodness gracious, great balls of fire. They mention specifically speaking, technology indeed moved rapidly in the 1950s. And they point out the transistor, which would replace the cumbersome electronic vacuum tube as an amplifier or weak signals, was invented at Bell. We know the history of that. But basically speaking, let's jump down to this part. Electronic hardware suddenly could be designed and built in ever smaller sizes and operate on lower power and would produce much less heat during operation. These advances, coupled with new advancements toward long-range rockets for military purposes, provided both technology and the lifting capability to make possible the design and launch of SIGINT satellites. And again, U.S. military reconnaissance satellites, et cetera, et cetera. Okay? Why I point this out? Because it points out, like, obviously, some of these weaponized systems, you get it, right? Okay. Where am I going with this? I'm ahead of you. We see here, basically speaking, that you have satellite constellations, secure communications, and how blockchain protocols can authenticate inter-satellite communications, which would reduce reliance on terrestrial networks and enhance security against tampering or cyber threats. This could apply to SIGINT by ensuring immutable logging of intercepted data or command events. Now watch this. I know a lot of you guys aren't a fan of NASA. I'm not trying to make this a debate of who's right and who's wrong. And, you know where I'm going with that. I'm just showing you material. So here's NASA. Okay. We see from NASA, again, they pointed out in this particular document, blockchain application within a multi-sensor satellite architecture. I swear, I promise, you'll see where we're going with this one as well. So basically speaking, we see in the abstract, like it says here, with the thrust towards multi-sensor satellite architecture for Earth and space exploration, such a constellation of swarms, new technologies are required to enable the transition to this future capability. One of the areas of interest is establishing secure, efficient, and prioritized data and command communication pathways among ground and space-based sources for each such systems. This paper presents early research results on the potential role, capabilities, and value of blockchain usage within constellation and swarm satellite architectures. It demonstrates the use of blockchain, smart contract, and distributed ledger capabilities for secured, prioritized, multi-sensor, satellite collaborative data exchanges, as well as logging, tracking, and command and control events. All right, there's a lot more to it than just that. Now watch this. I know this is not Ripple, and I know this is not so much Stellar, but it will get into Stellar. This is Quant for a brief moment. You see Quant's Overledger with Make.com, prepare a smart contract deployment transaction, kicking it over to NASA. They're going to make an API call to NASA, kicking it back down to the Overledger. Do what? Execute a smart contract to invoke a transaction. And we even have interoperability with SpaceX to do what? Search Starlink satellites. Yes, Starlink. And more importantly, on the right side, execute basically what? Sign smart contract deployment transaction. Things like QNT. All right, here's another source. MDPI points out some key things. If you're not aware of them, they are a publisher of open access scientific journals. It publishes over 390 peer-reviewed open access journals. And it makes them among the largest publishers in the world in terms of journal article output, and was one of the largest publishers of open access articles in 2020. Why do I want to point them out? Because they point out the common ground. In their document, in this abstract, they specifically mention how blockchain has found many applications apart from Bitcoin, different fields, potential to be very useful in the satellite communications and space industries. And look what it says here. Decentralized and secure protocols for processing and manipulating space transactions of satellite swarms. Again, back to what I just literally showed you on the previous documents and tabs, et cetera, et cetera. Okay? Satellite swarms in the form of space digital tokens called SDT can be built using blockchain tech. Tokenizing space transactions using SDTs will open the door to different new blockchain-based solutions for the advancement of constellation-based satellite communications in space industries. So when I think of like constellation, I mean, obviously there's things like Constellation DAG, but I'm thinking like, obviously like Stellar and their connections, if you will. Watch this for a second, because we see here, called a coincidence, a new update from Jed McCaleb. He literally shared this yesterday on the 12th. What? Vast first crew mission coming up. And as we blow this up, Vast has been selected by NASA Space Ops. See how we did that? For the 6th private astronaut mission to the International Space Station. Launching no earlier than summer 2027, the commercial crew will spend up to 14 days aboard the station. And again, why point this out? Well, here's why. Back to the visual. Do you find it more than a coincidence that Overledger with Quant already has all this stuff? I don't, because I realize that whether it's Ripple, Stellar, and Quant, there's an interconnected world here, and that's important. And also, the last part, Vast points out Haven demo integration underway as they prepare for on-orbit testing of Haven 1's core systems. Again, their core systems apparently have interoperability with those specific core systems. We know about Vast and basically people like Jed McCaleb. We know about Vast and also the whole thing of Starlink and obviously Elon Musk. And again, this visual is profound. So there you have it, a real super deep dive on XRP, I guess apparently XLM, so Quant, The Simpsons, in 1994, the man who exposed the entire system. Do me a solid if you listen to the entire outline and simply type in this key word into the comments or phrase, and that is true research, because I feel as though I'm trying my best to provide you deep, true research on this channel. I really appreciate if you guys could basically share my research with your loved ones, people that don't know about some of this stuff. It's more than appreciated. Also, check out my Patreon. We have a great community over there. Still trying to build that up and so on, but we did call plays very early in things like Canton, among some other ones. And again, we're still very much up on that. We call Canton at roughly 7 cents. And again, get into some of these plays long before everybody on YouTube or X is talking about it. So there you have it. That's an outline. So glad to give you guys this information. As you could tell, I'm very excited about a lot of this stuff because I know where we're going with this. And even though it seems as though we're in the dumps, I take advantage of these opportunities. Let me know if you guys are as well. And we'll keep you any bit further. May the Lord Jesus, yes, the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, bless you all. I truly mean that. We'll see you guys on the next video. Over and out.
After these messages, we'll be right back.
I have many friends that are earning every single day trading futures on BTCC. It's a simple process, and even if you don't want to learn how to trade, you could follow a trader on the site and let him do the trading for you. And again, I'm not trying to have any of you guys use your hard-earned money to lose anything. You don't know what you're doing? Don't jump into this, but there is money to be made, and don't use your nest egg for leverage trading. Use a separate portfolio. But I suggest learn how to trade. Earn you some extra money on BTCC. It's easy. You don't have to KYC, and you don't have to use a virtual private network VPN. This is a wonderful site. They've been around since 2011. Give them a shot. Also, when you earn that extra money, you can store that on your Decent wallet. The Decent wallet was not affected by the XRPL debacle, where the backdoor of many wallets was open and there was a breach. So Decent wallet was not affected by that. Decent wallet is as safe as you keep your seed phrase. It's a wonderful product, and you can get the discount by using the link. It's the only way to get the affiliate discount, and that is to use an affiliate link. So that link is popping up on the upper right side of your screen, and it is the one that you will use. You will also get free shipping. Pick you up a Decent wallet today. Secure your assets. If you don't have them stored in a wallet and sitting on an exchange, then you're at risk. So pick you one up today. Thank you.